Calling to order March 5th school committee meeting. Is the first thing on the agenda is the auditor report?
It's a public comment to start.
Okay.
So do we have any public comment at home? Just put your name in the chat, name and address.
Is there any?
No, there's nothing in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
Chat is on. We don't see anyone in the chat. Anyone at home trying to make public comment from a phone but can't type in? Just unmute and please let us know. If not, we'll move to chair report and or student report. I don't know how you wanted to reorganize. Either of you wanted to reorganize the agenda. But we know Frank is up first. Okay, last call for public comment. Okay. See the chat.
I'm back. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks for starting.
And closing the chat.
Shall we go backwards and take student report first so that if you wish to go to, you can go ahead?
Sure.
All right. Or we'll start with that.
Yeah, so I'm filling for Diego tonight because we can't be here. But I just had a couple points that I wanted to discuss. And some of them are from our most recent student advisory board meeting last night, and some others are just kind of like sentiments from the student body. So first off, I just wanted to talk about briefly student reactions to the news that the schedule was not going to be changing this coming year. I think the general consensus was that everybody was pretty relieved that that change wouldn't be happening at least next year. And I know actually, especially all the band and chorus kids that I've talked to were really relieved because they had concerns about less kids joining band or chorus if it took up a class block. Because there's so many other classes that they needed or wanted to take during that time. And then the second thing that we talked about at the student advisory board meeting was we talked a lot about how much choice our school offers in terms of classes and how it can be kind of like difficult and stressful for kids to choose and kind of stress about not getting into the classes that you want to get into. So we talked a bit about like the negatives there. But I honestly think the general consensus is that people really do enjoy and appreciate having so much choice in their schedules, even if it does like cause stress sometimes. I think it's kind of one of the things that makes our school particularly unique is that we have so many course offerings despite being a really small school. The other thing that I kind of sort of wanted to mention that's connected to that in regards to like change and how it affects the student body is that I think a lot of really big changes can be a lot more palatable for the student body if they're given like notice about them. Like even with the schedule, I know that right off the bat, people had very, very strong feelings. And while people are definitely still against changes in the schedule, I think people are having a lot less strong feelings about it. So I think that like myself and other students kind of understand that there's going to be shifts and changes within the school, and that's just kind of a part of how things work. But I think like, again, kind of being able to plan for those changes, people are way more accepting of them. Because even as a freshman, like myself and other students kind of like plan ahead the next 4 years because there's certain classes that you have to be able to take to get to some of those higher classes junior and senior year. So you can really feel like a wrench is being thrown in things when there's big changes in the schedule. Yeah, but I really do think that if there's proper like notice given, kids are way more accepting to changes happening, even if they seem like negative changes. And then lastly, on a positive note, I feel like I kind of have to mention, although like buzz and excitement that's been happening recently about the Costa Rica trip. So a lot, I think about 42 kids from mostly the junior and senior classes took a trip to Costa Rica over over February break. I didn't personally go because I'm a part of the Fresh program, but a lot of my friends went and had a blast. And the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because I know that one of the things that the school kind of like works on is, I guess, kind of like instilling in students like awareness of themselves and their own position relative to other people in the world. I think it's called like being an empathetic global citizen in the vision of a graduate. You got it. Yeah. Well, kind of when I was hearing about people talking about their experience in Costa Rica, I was kind of expecting people to talk about how much fun they had, like whitewater rafting and all this stuff. And people were definitely talking about that. But what was kind of surprising to me is that a lot more often I was hearing people talk about like the people that they met and like the new things that they witnessed and just kind of like experiencing a new culture and kind of like seeing outside of Manchester and Essex and the towns we live in here. And they had kind of like this like enthusiasm to talk about it that I just thought was like really cool to see. So that was kind of just like cool to see like a benchmark on that progress towards that goal of being like global citizens. I think like definitely like Manchester and Essex, they're both beautiful towns, but they can be kind of like a little bit of like a bubble sometimes from like the rest of the world and what's going on around us. So I just thought it was really cool that people had that reaction when they were seeing other cultures. Yeah, and then I think that's it.
Damn. Anyone have questions for Stella?
And I would just like to make my day with rest so that there's enough graduates. It's awesome. Thank you.
One other thing that came up right at the end of the student advisory meeting, I can't remember if it was right after you left, you were still there. But we talked a little bit about next time we meet, doing kind of a teach-in on what it is the group really is and what it has been kind of informal, which is great, but it's best to be informal when we know what the structure, you know, this is going to be and that sort of thing. So I think next time we might address some of that.
That's good. Yeah. I think also like clarity about like Diego's position and how like people, you know, like how
How it
kind of that
works,
position
yeah.
works and what that role is.
Yeah.
Clarity around that, and then also, yeah, definitely how the board works, who's on the board, how do you get onto the board, because it is a little bit fluid right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are definitely things that are going to be discussed moving forward.
Can you tell us how, and you might not know because you didn't go to Costa Rica, but how that field trip sort of came to be organized and came together?
I can't speak a ton to that again because I'm a part of the French program, but I know that it's organized through an outside tour company called EF, and that students are able to sign up not directly affiliated with the school, but that it's advertised within the school. Yes, it's a third-party organizer called EF. Who runs the tours or organizes the tours. They do the tour guide stuff, all of that.
Has there been any conversation about traveling to?
We have the French trip. We have a loosely French-related trip scheduled for April break. It's not through the same tour company, but it usually is through the same tour company. But there's a French and Spanish one, I believe, every other year.
Where do you guys go?
We're going to France.
We should go to North of the Caribbean.
Montreal.
Nobody asked me that.
So can I just piggyback on this? We met with Diane Kilgore from the Cultural Council today, and they brought a speaker series in, and one of the upcoming speakers is David McCullough, the grandson. And he has done some work and done some writing around his kind of 1 week cultural experiences. So I think part of this is to introduce an opportunity for our students to go on 1 year learning experiences around cultural competency around the globe. So we're excited. We don't have all the details yet, but I know Julie Scroy was there, Heather was there. We're going to look at how we can partner with the council to bring these opportunities to our students. And also, you know, potentially start laying the groundwork for reciprocal visits to Manchester from folks around the country and around the world. So it's exciting and timely. If that, it's nice to know students are meeting.
Any other questions for Stella? You are free to stay or go as you wish.
I'll say them.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you. So sorry I was late. Just to clarify here, we did public comment, we've done a student report now. I'd like to do a brief chairperson's report and then get through the consent agenda and then reorder, but I'll mention that if that's okay, just so that if anyone has to go, we've already done the consent agenda, at least follow up for. So my stuff is just a couple housekeeping items. Just as a heads up, we did get the reply from MASC on the question about schedules, schedule changes that was discussed at our last meeting, and I finally remembered to forward that. Thanks for the heads up, Jamie. So you should all have that at this point. And then the only other thing I just want to bring up is Pam and I were looking at the upcoming meeting schedule, which on the 19th, we have a pretty light agenda, and then we kind of have a little bit of a bonus meeting on April 2nd, because with Manchester changing their town meeting schedule, we don't have the shortened one on April 1st. We can actually have a regular meeting on April 2nd instead. And then at Manchester's town meeting, we'll just have that very brief one beforehand. So that April 2nd meeting will be primarily about the EES project and facilities at that point. So we'll have some things to report. And that March 19th one, again, is pretty light. So for that reason, I think it might be wise if we can tonight to, if the board is in agreement, one way that we could structure this so that we could support a very large school event that's happening right now, if we wish, would be to delay the subcommittee reports and the school committee action items to the 19th as agenda items. Because then we'll still have Frank's auditor's report, we'll have Heather's update, and then the superintendent's items. Those are the only things that are time critical right
Yep,
now.
and mine is very
Yours is
short and just the time sensitive pieces.
Yeah. So are we okay with that? Say nods. Okay, perfect.
Maybe we'll have them.
Okay. Hearing no objection, that is how we will proceed, and I will end my chairperson's report there with that. So the consent agenda for tonight will include the acceptance of warrants, the AP vouchers, 1048 through 1054. That's 3 high school and 1 middle school student activity account transfers, and then 3 more standard AP vouchers. The minutes from 2/6/24 and the donation, which Pam sent a nice note about helping us understand. This is a $2,200 donation from Friends of Manchester-Essex Performing Arts, who are willing to donate that money to have a acoustic diagnostic assessment of our auditorium, so that we can see what's working, what's not, and what some recommendations might be, which Pam spelled out nicely in your email, that the reason we're discussing it here, even though it's less than $5,000, is that there could be capital planning discussions that take place as a result of that. But she was very clear that there's no expectation of moving immediately on results, but for that reason, we have it here. It is part of the consent agenda, so let's go through the motion and have discussion. Is there a motion?
Consent agenda.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Questions?
This is including the performing arts.
Yes.
So I think it's worth it. You already nodded to them, the acknowledgement that this is probably needed. I know I've been to some of the plays recently, and sometimes hard to hear the performers because of the acoustics there. So I think it's well timed and well appreciated.
Yeah, very much appreciated.
Very much so.
Very much. All right, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. So for anyone listening on replay, Friends of Manchester-Essex Performing Arts, thank you very much for that generous donation. We're very excited about it. And with that, we will welcome Frank Surratt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Kelly, appreciate the opportunity to present the results of the audit. I do have a handout if you still want to talk about the E&D that I can pass out.
That'd be
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We like it, Amy.
You want to join us at the-
Yes, please. Unless that's whatever's best spot for you.
I'm fine where I am, unless you prefer the rest of those.
Wherever you want. Join us at the table as well.
Or Michelle, I can.
Just take it all. Probably worth noting that Michelle Cresta is here tonight. She's our incoming Director of Finance and Operations. She's kind enough to come tonight to just hear where we are in terms of the audit report. We are excited for her arrival on the 25th.
No one more than you, but we all are, no one more than you.
Well, we were remarking today, we think we've kept things nice and tidy for her arrival and haven't made too many messes for her to pick up, but there are some questions we have when she gets here.
Sure. Welcome.
I always like to start out by thanking superintendent, finance team, director of finance, treasurer, everybody in the finance team who participates in the audit. As usual, we have very good cooperation assistance. Gonna miss Abby, worked with him for a good number of years and had a good relationship with him. But on the flip side, I have to look forward to the opportunity to work with Michelle. She and I actually go back a long way, although we really haven't had a lot of interaction the last, but we both started our careers with Powers and Sullivan. Powers and Sullivan has recently merged with Markham, which is a big CPA firm nationally, like 13th largest in the country. So we're really excited about that and all the opportunities, resources and everything that come along with that. But again, I am like really, I think that's going to be great addition for the school district, and we should do a great job. That being said, just from a timing standpoint, similar to prior years, we do the audit in a couple of different phases. We usually come out with what we consider to be our preliminary work in what's later May. And we're just trying to get a head start on some of the year-end audit work that we can do. There are things that we can do at that time, even though it's before year-end, the majority of the transactions are in. So we can do a lot of the testing of the federal board. We can look at the budget, we can audit debt. There's a lot of like planning and reviewing of internal controls and transaction testing and that type of thing that we try to get out of the way at that time. And then we come back in at the end of the year, do our year-end testing, wrap up any loose ends we might have had, our preliminary work. And then we work on trying to compile the financial statements, put reports together and all of that stuff. And it's similar to prior years, like I said, everybody was very cooperative and getting the information to us. We've really, over the last several years, I think COVID really even kind of helped us a lot. Started utilizing a secure portal to be able to upload information so that the information is safe and secure, and it also allows the school to provide the information to us in advance, which is really good because then we can start doing some prep work before we even come out here, and we can have a really efficient time. The information, ideally, if all the information could be prepared and uploaded and available, like, maybe a week before we start, that really allows us to hit the ground running and to be able to kind of get through everything, get our audit procedures done, and get like a good draft of the reports. If there are things that are hanging, then the audit can, drag on a little bit, and it just kind of depends on how diligent team is about gathering those things. And the things that usually kind of hang on an audit are like the OPEB report, especially in the year that a new valuation is needed because there's census data. There's a good amount of information in the year that a new valuation is done that needs to be compiled and pulled together. And it's really good to try to be proactive about that and like plan in advance with the actuary, let them know the date, try to coordinate having it available and ready before the audit starts. And then another one is fixed assets, because that's one that only gets done once a year typically. And, people aren't really familiar with doing it when you only do something once a year. It's probably not the thing that you're the best at. And so that's another one that is kind of good to get a head start on. It's not, as a school district, it's not a city or town, so there's not as much going on. So it's a lot more manageable than a city or town. So it's easier from that standpoint, depending on what you have going for projects and stuff like that. But we didn't have any issues this year. One of the areas that's always like a critical area in the audit is cash. We're always, on top of cash and trying to make sure that the cash reconciliations are being done every month, that it's being reconciled by the treasurer between the bank and the book, and that it's being reconciled to the general ledger balance too. And they've been good about doing that. Treasurer has been doing a great job with that. We're able to reconcile the June 30th balances. We're able to verify all the reconciling items, so we're very comfortable with the processes. The internal controls that are in place there. So that's always good to see from an auditor's standpoint. That definitely puts us on the right track to be able to get the audit done efficiently. So just wanted to talk about those things quickly. I wanted to jump into a couple of required communications, just go through those with you really quickly, the things that are standard requirements for communicate to you, and I'll just go through some highlights, and then we can just walk through, it won't take us long, go through the E&D, and show you how we arrive at those numbers from the financial statements. So as the auditors, we're responsible for planning and performing the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. Management is responsible for designing, implementing, and maintaining a system of internal controls to safeguard the district assets. Management is also responsible for the selection of significant accounting policies. The significant accounting policies can be found in Note 1 of the financial statements. There were no new policies that were adopted during the year. The application of existing policies was not changed. Accounting estimates, they're an integral part of the financial statements, and they're based on management's knowledge and experience about current and past events, as well as assumptions about future events. The most significant estimates in the financial statements relate to the net pension liability, net OPEB liability, compensated absences, depreciation on fixed assets. We review the underlining assumptions and the key factors that go into developing the estimates. We found them to be reasonable in relation to the financial statements as a whole. Difficulties encountered while performing the audit. Happy to report that there were no difficulties encountered while dealing with management performing the audit. Audit adjustments. Our standards define an audit adjustment as a proposed correction of the financial statements that may not have been detected except through our auditing procedures. And I'm happy to report that there were no such audit adjustments that were required. The last one relates to disagreements with management, and that's a matter whether or not resolved to our satisfaction concerning an accounting, reporting, or auditing matter that's significant to the financial statements or the auditor's report. And I'm happy to report that there were no such disagreements with management. So with that out of the way, jump into some financial highlights. Your general fund balance, if you have the financial statements in front of you, you can find that on page 14, financial statement. Total $2.4 million. Of that, $118,000 is restricted for debt service. $98,000 is committed for the capital stabilization fund that we have. Another $237,000 related to year-end encumbrances. And $287,000 is assigned for subsequent year expenditures. And that's really just E&D, and you also have a small debt reserve that's being used to fund your budget. So that's money that's set aside to fund the fiscal 24 budget. That left you with unassigned fund balance of $1.7 million, which is about 5% of expenditures. And that number, as we'll see in more detail when we look at the handouts I gave you, is like the starting point for the E&D calculation, the unassigned fund balance, and it normally approximates your E&D depending on, you know, other factors, different adjustments that you can have up or down for the E&D calculation. We'll talk about it. Your E&D was certified at $1.5 million at the end of June 30th, 2023, and that's the balance that's available to you fiscal 2024. And that was $150,000 under the 5% E&D limit. So have that come out any closer? But you didn't have to return any money for under. Operating results, general fund operations resulted in a slight increase of $10,000. Your revenues came in over budget by $237,000, and that's mainly due to investment income. Your expenditures came in $392,000 under budget. That's mainly related to non-salary expenditures. And those things obviously generate an increase. Typically, when you had budgeted $520,000 of E&D to fund the budget, so that offsets the surpluses, and that's how you kind of got to your $10,000 increase in fund balance at the end of the year. But you know, these budgetary results, similar to prior years, you know, you're a little conservative on your budget estimates, which is good. You don't want to come in like under budget on your revenues and not over by a lot. So the budget is structurally sound, and it seems like you have good budgetary controls in place too, as far as controlling spending and all of that. So controls are working effectively there. School choice fund, this is funds that are available without a further appropriation by this to be appropriated by the school committee. You have $1.5 million in the fund at the end of the year. You received 606,000 and you expended 634,000. So you pretty much maintain that balance, and so that's just like a reserve. It's available for unexpected things similar to the E&D. It's nice to have that extra cushion there for unexpected things that come up. Other significant transactions, long-term debt, you got 42.2 million outstanding at the end of the year. You didn't issue any new long-term debt. In 2023, you paid down 2.7 million of debt principal, and you had $1.3 million of short-term debt outstanding on the Memorial Elementary School project. Your net OPEB liability increased by $758,000, total $23.4 million. You've got a fully funded discount rate, which is great, 7.5%. Having that discount rate really reduces the liability down. There's a sensitivity analysis in the footnote disclosure that shows you what the impact of a 1% change in the discount rate, either up or down, has on the financial statements. I could flip to it. I should have made a note of what that changes, so I could just tell you, but you can open that up and take a look at it. It's significant. So having that fully funded rate really makes a big difference and brings down your overall liability. And I don't see many school districts, and we audit a good number of them, that have a fully funded rate like that. There's even a lot of cities and towns that don't have a fully funded rate, and that's because Manchester-Essex was proactive about funding this. It was one of the first school districts to come up with a plan to start funding this liability, and you have a plan in place and you've been following it, and that's why you're able to get that rate, which is great. The OPEB liability was about 17.3% funded at the end of the year. You contributed another $579,000 to the fund. You also earned $231,000 of investment income compared to a loss last year because the market was down, but the market was back. That's good to see. That position totaled $4.9 million at the end of the year, so you're continuing to build up that balance and the trust to fund that liability. Net pension liability increased by $1.99 million and total $6.9 million at the end of the year. And you're a member of the Essex Regional Retirement System, and that's for anybody that's not part of the Mass Teachers Retirement System. Essex Regional is about 58% funded. They're using a discount rate of 7%, a little more conservative than what the school is using, and but it's in line with what other retirement systems are using. So those are the financial highlights. And just to summarize, we're able to issue a clean opinion on the financial statements. An unmodified opinion means the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Financial performance indicates a sound budget process, effective budgetary controls. The information we received was accurate. We didn't note any internal control deficiencies, and all of our interactions were professional and courteous with the team. And so that's it for the financials. Next after that is the report on federal awards. Plus the 5 minutes for this one. This is required for any entities that are expending more than $750,000 a year in federal funds. In 2023, the school expended $858,000, so you qualify for that. $254,000 was spent on child nutrition, $341,000 on special education, another $61,000 related to disaster grants, and then $202,000 on other education grants. We have to go through a process to determine which programs need to be tested as major programs. The special education program needed to be tested this year. We didn't have any findings. We didn't have any question costs, no deficiencies in internal controls. So this was a clean report. And it's the best results you can hope for in that report. And the management letter, we did have one new comment in the management letter. It relates to the prepayment of debt service. And so the only thing that you're really legally allowed to prepay in Massachusetts is special education tuition. And so this was just a case where I think there was just some concerns about making sure that the payment got to the bank by the due date. And it's always, I think, a little kind of stressful around the 4th of July with the holidays and everything. But you really have to be careful to not make that payment before June 30th. And the payment went out on June 29th for some debt interest, about $157,000. And you do actually end up getting penalized for that on your E&D calculation, as you'll see when we take a look at that. That, was really budgeted out of the FY24 appropriation. So it really shouldn't have been paid before July 1st. So I think that everybody's on the finance team is well aware of it. And I think that it's been communicated and shouldn't happen again going forward. Financial reassess organizational structure, roles and responsibilities. That's a comment that we've talked about. It's been the management letter for a few years. You've hired someone for that position as a payroll and purchasing clerk. And so we're hoping that that's going to have a good impact in the business office and give you a few more resources to try to, be a little bit more proactive, I guess, in preparing for the audit. Being able to get some of the year-end closing stuff done and try to accelerate like the audit process, maybe get the audit done a little bit sooner, that type of thing. I think that's been a goal. I know that that was always the goal of Michelle's predecessor. So hopefully we can move in that direction. But we're considering that to be resolved now because we've got that person in place. And then there was one other comment that's been in there that's recommending that written formally documented financial policies be adopted related to different things like establishing benchmarks for like excess and deficiency, fund balance levels, capital stabilization, funding, have a plan for, what your levels, what you want your levels to be in there and how much you're willing to fund here. You could have a policy for like personal use of credit cards, those types of things. I understand this is something that the school committee is actively working on, so hopefully this will be something that's resolved in the near future as well. But that's everything related to the audit. I think the last thing I had was just to talk about the excess and deficiency. Unless anybody has any questions about any of that before I move on.
Could we ask questions about the audit part before we jump?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I have one question. So when I think of discount rate, I think of, cash flow analysis. What do you mean by the fully funded discount rate?
So with the OPEB, what they do is they, depending on the funding level of your trust,
Okay,
if you don't have enough funds in your trust to pay, like the benefits of active retirees for more than a year, then you have to use the AA municipal bond rate, which is like probably about 3.5–4% right now.
Okay.
And then as you continue to like build up funds in your trust, you start to qualify for a higher rate. And so what they do is they'll take a look and they'll kind of project out, like, look at how much money you've set aside, look at how much you're paying in benefits, how much benefits are being earned. So it's something the actuary does. And then they'll start to give you like a blended rate. So you'll start off with that 20-year AA municipal bond rate, and then they'll be able to give you the long-term expected rate of return for a certain period of time until the trust runs out of money. And so then they'll kind of blend that together. So you'll get that rate. So maybe like the first year as you start to raise that value. And then after that, they'll apply the AA municipal bond rate. And so once you get enough money in the trust, then you get what they call a fully funded rate. The one you get to the long-term expected rate of return.
okay,
Is that because the way we've structured paying into OPEB, we always use the phrase, we're on the path to full funding. So does it mean that when the actuary does the math, it bears out that we will hit that goal?
So I think that fully funded that you're referring to might be fully funding the liability, where you have no OPEB liability anymore. But this is, they call it like a crossover point, where you have enough money in the trust to be able to pay like the benefits of like active employees. And so, yeah, they'll start off by giving you a blended rate. Like if you have nothing set aside, you have to use that AA municipal bond rate. Then if you have a certain amount, they'll get the long-term rate. And then, for the years where you don't have enough, they'll apply the double A rate, and then they'll blend those two together, so you'll have something that's less than your long-term expected rate of return, but greater than the 20-year municipal bond rate.
Sure, so it sounds like the 7.5 is like the maximum rate you can
Yes.
assign to this.
Yeah, I mean, they take a look at like what your target ratios are for how you're investing the money, and, you know, what you can earn on the funds. And so usually, consult with like your investment advisor to say, okay, what's the long-term rate of return that we can expect on these funds? And how do you have the assets allocated and all of that? 7.5% is kind of aggressive. That's on the high side, but a lot of them have come down. They're, I would say 7% for a fully funded is probably, you know, more, you know, common. And there are some that are even lower, like, you know, they get down to like 6.5, and Andover, I think, is even lower than that, but they're really conservative about trying to fund it. That's actually their pension. So, but yeah, but it definitely helps lowering liability down a lot for every percentage.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else have questions about what's been covered so far? No?
Question about you.
Yeah, we can do all at once, yeah. I have a question. So, on the management level, comments for the end, but my question is about the repeated note about adopted formal financial policies, and we're trying. I think there's probably a conversation for us to have at our next meeting about, how we accomplish that best. But as I was reading through this, I was looking at things that make sense to me, benchmarks for E and D, fund balance levels, and long-term capital deficit. And then the other policies that should be considered are purchase order requirements and allowable use of district credit cards. And to my mind, in reading, I'm thinking of those more as practice than policy, but I am not skilled in this sort of thing. So I guess my question is, could you give me just an example of the level of detail that would be typical for such a thing? And I know as we go through that work, we will do that, but it would help me to understand it better. When I looked at our, like the policy we do have for procurement requirements, you know, it's all about 50,000 and over, 10 to 50,000, but then less than 10, it's just through the exercise of sound business practices. So could you just speak to those more specific a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the credit cards, it's really kind of an individual thing, and what you're comfortable with as a committee. I know that, you know, I see different like policies in different places. And some are really strict, and they just have like one card in the business office that everybody uses. Others a little bit more lenient about it, and they'll let, you know, employees use their own personal credit cards, and they get reimbursed. And so it's really, you know, the risk appetite of maybe, you know, what you're comfortable with, what you think makes sense from a practical standpoint, like.
We're
And so-
we're
This
very
might
tight.
just be, I was gonna say, this might just be formalizing in policy practices that are already in place.
Yeah, we are that district with the single district credit card, and you need to fill out a PO before anything is put on it unless it's an emergency situation. For instance, I think it came through, I don't know if it was this student activities or it'll be in the next, they needed to put a down payment on the buses or something like that, and it needed to be done within 2 days, so Mary will write a PO to encumber the money from the student activities account, the charge will go on the card. We don't hand out the card.
Yeah.
Very infrequently. If there was an emergency in facilities and they needed to run to Home Depot to bail something out, we might give them the card to go. And we don't actively reimburse personal credit cards. We do reimbursements, so if there's an instance where that happens, it's pretty tight what they have to, everyone has to produce the receipt, the bill, the credit card bill showing payment, et cetera. There could be some work. We had that discussion actually when Michelle visited one day about, do we want to streamline some of these things? But just to let you know, we are very, very tight on that.
I have no doubt that there are these things, but I mean, we've had other management letter, you know, in the past where it's really just been a matter of documenting and formalizing what's already in place, and that's just something we can get to. But then some of the bigger issues about benchmarks for VB, that's work that we need to do together, so.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there are very strict
Right.
controls in place, which is great.
Yeah.
But as a committee, it like, if you don't have a formal policy in place, then, change superintendents,
Yeah.
change, personnel. Someone else might have a completely different, idea about what they think is, strong enough controls. And it might not be in line with what you think they should be. And so that's the nice thing about having these policies formalized, is that they kind of last the test of time until another committee decides to change them. And that doesn't usually happen very easily. And I think that what the district is doing is probably a best practice to limit the use of personal credit cards, because there's a lot of room, expenditures to try to get purchased that really shouldn't be. So that would, my opinion, not be a bad one to.
Thank you. Jake, do you have a question on that?
Yeah, just a quick question on the policy conversation we've been having. Try to get the benchmarks and whatnot. And accountant, so I'm coming to learn that there's technical differences between what counts as like an official reserve account versus a revolving account that we treat as a reserve. In your recommendation, are you suggesting that we include all of those in a reserve policy, or just the technical ones that are?
That's just the technical ones. Yeah. I haven't really seen anybody. The biggest one that I would say that the revolving fund would probably be a school choice fund. I haven't really seen anyone with a policy on that. I mean, you certainly could have one as to like what you think is an acceptable use of it. I don't know if you want to restrict, what that's used for. I think those are probably conversations that you need to have, but you don't have a whole lot of extra E&D, and so it does give you some flexibility to not really restrict it. I mean, you could, have a policy to keep it at a certain level. Although under, certain circumstances, you might, want to be able to override that level too if you need to. So it could be like a kind of flexible policy that, our goal is to keep it here. However, if a need arises, we can try to replenish it back to that point. Something like that.
Anyone else have questions on what we've covered so far? I've got more, but they're not till the end.
Yes, just to follow up on what you asked, so is it accurate to say that the comment is directed specifically at the account and what?
The capital stabilization fund was another one that was listed. What else was on there? I think you already have there's a plan for OPEB. I don't know if that's been formally adopted by the school committee. I think that's in the comment, but that might actually already be formalized. I'm not sure.
The OPEB plan was memorialized in a teacher's contract. Because it was negotiated, yeah, it was a byproduct of negotiation that we came up with a funded plan,
Okay.
including the formula.
Yeah, that's there, then you probably don't need to come to policy. That doesn't sound like. That's good. Could that be like renegotiated anything?
Yes, but now, the school committee would be at the table for renegotiation, so in a way, it's a joint policy, you could call it a joint policy to a certain degree.
But it's good for us to account for that, know where these things sit. And we'll move on to Rita. Thank you. All right.
I'm sure Michelle is very familiar with this first document here. So this is something that the Division of Local Services puts out every year. That's an agreement with the revenue with the state that certifies the E&D, and they kind of make all the rules around it. And so this is basically the instructions they send out to school districts. And part of the E&D submission is reporting a balance sheet, and so they have a template that they give out as well that kind of goes along with this for the balance sheet preparation. But this is basically giving the school districts instruction about what they need to support, what they need to supply to ELS to be able to do their E&D certification. So they need the balance sheet, which is what that first section is talking about. There's a checklist that has to be filled out. With the balance sheet, they have basically like a summary balance sheet, like I included in here, and then they also have what they call combining statements. So for any column like special revenues or trust funds or anything, capital projects, if there's more than one fund within a column on the balance sheet, then they ask for these combining statements, which break those out and give them all the individual fund balances that are included in those columns. And that allows them to take a look at the fund balances and be able to say, okay, are any of these funds in a deficit? Um, So they talk about on page 2, balance sheet presentation, and they talk more about that on page 3. But once you get over to page 4, they start talking about potential increases to E and D and potential decreases to E and D. And these are the things that really have an impact your E and D. So the potential increases, if you hadn't got all your state aid payments in by June 30th, if they came in by September 30th, you could actually add those to your E and D balance. So you would typically book a receivable for that, but the money didn't come in, they would deduct for it. And then for the federal and state reimbursements, same type of thing. If you have a fund that is in deficit, if you got the collections in, if you got the receipts in by September 30th, they wouldn't deduct or penalize you on your E and D calculation for that. However, if the money doesn't come in, they will give you a deduction on your E and D calculation for it. Decreases to E and D, the one that I highlighted there, illegal deficits or any deficit not funded in the district. They make it sound really bad by saying illegal deficits, but if you have, special revenue funds that have deficit balances that were, they're showing it overspent for whatever reason, it's, typically it's an accounting error where expenditures they were charged to the fund that shouldn't have been charged to the fund or something like that, but they're not really concerned with why it happened. It's just if you didn't get the money in by September 30th, they're gonna, give you a penalty on your E and D calculation. And then the last one that I highlighted there relates to the prepayments, and that's what we were talking about. And it does talk about the fact that you can legally prepay tuition. And so I'm not going to read through all of these, but you can certainly capital project deficits. If you don't have a short-term note outstanding, which you guys do, you have the $1.3 million ban out. If you have a deficit in a capital project fund, but you don't have a ban outstanding to cover the deficit, they'll also deduct for that. So that those can be a pretty big deduction if you haven't borrowed, but most schools and most communities are aware that they're pretty diligent. The financial advisors are kind of working with them on that too. We don't see that happen very often where someone would get a reduction for not having a ban, a note outstanding on capital project. If you had a variance in cash that was unexplainable, unrecognized, they would deduct that from your E and D calculation. They're basically going to penalize you for that. Or if you have an amount that can't be substantiated on your balance sheet by supporting documentation, they can deduct for that too. So with all that being said, if you flip over to the next page, it's be a copy of the FY23 balance sheet, and that's right out of the FY23 financials. And down in the fund balance section for the general fund, you heard me talking about the total fund balance was $2,423,000 when I was going over the fund balance. And then I said, you had 118,000 restricted. I think that one was for debt service, 98,000 committed to stabilization, 524 signed for encumbrances, left you with 1.682 or $1.7 million of unassigned fund balance. That unassigned fund balance, I said, is kind of the starting point for the E and D, and it usually approximates your E and D. And so the worksheet on the right-hand side is actually the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services calculation of E and D. So they do their own calculation, and you can actually go on their website and you can download this, which is what I did. And you can see that it's starting off with the unassigned fund balance from the balance sheet. And then it's deducting the prepaid, because that's not allowable. And then you can see that there were some funds that had some smallish deficits. There's nothing big here, but things that I'm sure shall get cleaned up. And so then they had total reductions of 168,000, 157,000 of that relates to the prepaid. So that other stuff is really pretty small stuff. If the 157,000 wasn't there, you wouldn't have much for deductions at all. You would have had about $11,000. And so you take your unreserved fund balance, subtract those deductions, and you come down to your E and D number, $1,513,998. And then what they do is they say, okay, what was your next year's budget? So in this case, this is being done as of FY23 or FY24. So they take your FY 24 budget, 5% of that. And then they say, okay, is the E&D over or under? If it's over, you have to refund money back to the towns. If it's under, which it is, then you don't have to do anything. And then I even put in the 2022 calculations, works the same way, but I thought it might be interesting to see how that one works. So you have $1,340,000 of unassigned fund balance on the balance sheet. Came over to the starting point for the calculation. Ended up having total deduction of $104,000. You have one bigger one in your special education grant. Apparently that money hadn't been. If the money came in for any of these by September 30th, they wouldn't have been deducted. And you had a balance of $1,235,000. It was under your 5%. So you didn't have to return it. I don't know if that helps. I think kind of explained it in terms of kind of easy to understand. The hardest part is getting to that unassigned balance that you're starting with. Really kind of putting the balance sheet together and making sure the numbers are valid and good numbers. Yep.
That does help, thank you, and it helps to understand the additions and subtractions that get us to the certified number. Can you speak to, so this year the certified was 1.5, we dedicated a portion of that to our operating budget, 350.
FY 20 or FY 25.
The 25.
Yeah.
Budget was just approved.
350. And so that would leave after, so that's around 1.2 or something that's left in there. What I'm trying to understand is when we talk about our reserve accounts and we think about them growing or ebbing and flowing over time, what happens to what's left in that E&D fund? And how does that relate to, like, for instance, maybe the easier thing to do would be, we know that you have it right here, that for fiscal 2023, we had 1.2 in certified E&D.
Yep.
We used some of it, and then we had some more this year. But it doesn't accumulate like that. You're not just it's not an asset account, right? It's not just adding to the pot, the entire year's balance.
It's an equity account, so, I mean, basically that's your ending fund balance. And so your total ending fund balance is the 2,703,000.
Where is that?
I'm looking at the 22 balance sheet. Might be easier to look at that one. Yeah. So your total ending fund balance at the bottom of page 14.
Yeah.
The total fund balance is 2,703,000, and of that 1,300,000 unassigned. You see that?
Yeah.
That's calculated over. Yeah. So that 2,703,000 is your ending fund balance. So when you're going into 23, that's actually the beginning balance that you're starting with. And so then you add the current year revenues to it, subtract your current year expenditures, and any transfers in and transfers out with the like revenues and expenses. And that gets you to your ending fund balance. And you can see that on the budget to actual statement and the financials. I think you have the financials in front of you.
I don't, but am I correct to understand that, so because you're starting the next year with that balance, you're essentially, so while we say that's excess and deficiency, we say it's a reserve account, you're actually spending down. Right? I mean, it's when I think of a reserve account, I think of your savings account that's going to just sit there, and next year, if I have some extra income, I'm going to just add to it. So if I have 100, I'm going to add another 50 next year, whatever. It's maybe that's not how E&D works, right? It's not like we
E&D
have.
is only a portion of your fund balance. It's the unassigned portion. So you've got your total fund balance, then you have those other like reserves that have got a fund balance. But depending on if those reserves stay the same, like your restricted amount, your committed amount, your assigned amount, if all those stay the same, then your unassigned fund balance will change by whatever your P&L activity was, and your revenue minus your expenditure.
Do you know which funds those are? Signed, like what would go into? What would fall under the category of assigned account?
Assigned is just your encumbrances, so it's, open purchase orders at the end of the year. So things that you had placed in order for, have not received the goods or services. And so that's just like a reservation of fund balance that you can essentially pay against those in the next year. And those purchase orders get carried over into the next year. It's like a budget that carried forward. And so that as you receive those goods and services in the next year, you can pay for them against those funds that you carried over. So it's just a reserve.
Frank, it might help. I think what I've learned, and I could be very wrong, is that when we talk at this table about our budget and about E and D, we're hyper-focused on assessments in and how we use E and D to offset those assessments and tracking that. But when you're factoring E and D, it's our entire financial portfolio, correct? That accounts for what these fund balances are, like our investments, our liabilities.
The D&D is focused on the general fund,
It's just the general fund.
but then it looks to the other funds to see if you have any other deficits or anything that need to be deducted that they need to adjust it for. But the focus is on this general fund column that we're looking at on the report that I gave you. And so, like I said, that's the starting point. And so that fund balance is going to change every year by your P&L activity. And your reserves can change too. So if you start with your total fund balance at the beginning, so you take your total fund balance at the end of one year, you start with that at your beginning fund balance at the beginning of the next year, add your revenues, subtract your expenses, you have transfers in and transfers out, add and subtract those, and then you'll come down to an ending fund balance in total. And then you just say, okay, what are our reserves? What are our restricted amounts? What are our committed amounts? And you come down to your unassigned number. And so the unassigned number just kind of is the result of taking your total plus all those other things. That's how you get to your unassigned. And then that is your starting point for your P&D calculation. They're basically saying those are other funds that are even designated for other purposes. So they're not available for you to use as E&D.
If you don't mind me jumping in here, the easy way to explain it is, yes, you have an E and D balance at the end of the year. You apply some of it towards your next year's budget typically. That's your spending down of it. So really, that's your starting basis for the next year. I mean, there are little things that ebb and flow and whatnot primarily. And then you have revenues that are over your revenue estimates. They get added to it essentially. And expenses or budgets that you didn't spend, those also get added to it. So essentially, that's what builds up the fund. And then all of these other items are offset, like they're hits against the balance. They're not technically funds out of the bank, funds off of financial statements, but they're deficits that we would money in such as this prepayment. All that money literally was just paid in the wrong year. We didn't pay it, unnecessarily. We still had to pay it, but they took it from that balance. Okay. Really, that's your starting point for the next year, even though it's a much simpler version of looking at the fund balance.
Is your question related to this?
I believe so, and it
Okay.
may actually be the same question, just phrased differently. I'm not quite sure. Stick with me here. And I'm not an accountant, but I am proud of myself that I found these pages myself, and what you have highlighted is what I was looking at, so that's awesome. But what I can't, and this is why I think it might be the same question, what I can't do is link FY 21.2 to anything in FY 23, and maybe what you're trying to say is, because that 1.2 million from FY 22. I don't want to say isn't real, but
You're seeing a whole years of activity in between them that you're not seeing the detail of.
why doesn't that number show up somewhere as the starting point?
Because you
to
don't
your
see the
point?
beginning balance, you're
You
only
only see in the ending.
So
I
if
don't
you
give you
look
the-
at
okay,
what
so-
he gave us, Jake, right?
I-
One to cater to.
Yeah.
And then it directly transfers up to the top.
Yeah, I can find that, but I can't do is link one year to the next.
Yeah.
I can give you
Yeah,
this is-
the, revenue and expenses.
Yeah.
So you've got a snapshot at June 30th of both years. on the balance sheet.
Okay,
So you have to go to the P and L to go from your beginning balance to your ending balance.
okay. So part of the reason that this has become such a topic for us is because we've been budgeting out of E&D for how many years? 5 years now? Right? To the total of like 1.2 million or something like that. And we've set this narrative up that you were spending it down, we committed all this, but the balance isn't going down. Right? So, I mean, it's gone down a little bit, but not by 1.2 million, right? So is it fair to say that in a year like this, where we committed hundreds of thousands of dollars, but still ended up with an excess, are we potentially saying we didn't actually use that? We didn't need to? It was like a budgeting thing to cover ourselves, a safety net?
You regenerated it. It means you have really sound budgeting practices. You're conservatively budgeting, which is a very good place to be.
Means we had, more revenue and less expenses than we projected.
Then you anticipate, absolutely.
So you want
But I'm not gonna spend it.
So,
We didn't use it.
okay, but then you said earlier that we had like a $10,000 increase because our excess kind of offset our $550,000 budgeting. But yet we saw a gain of almost 300,000 in E&D, not just 10 grand.
Yeah, I mean, the reserves come into play, so depending on how your reserves change, that can affect your E and D. That's a component of the fund balance.
I believe most of that was investment. What I'm hearing here, you had over $200,000 additional in investment income that was not budgeted. It's not planned.
So if I hear you correctly, by kind of conservatively budgeting, we are giving ourselves a safety net that we may not actually use every year, right? By committing it to the operating budget, we are not necessarily committing to spending that. If our budgeting process is conservative enough, it's giving us the cushion to assure ourselves that the budget will be covered. But
Yes.
through our practices, we may actually return much of that to E&D at the end of the year.
There's a very fine line, and you obviously don't want to give yourself a huge cushion, but you want to be able to meet. For example, had you budgeted interest income of, say, 400,000 more than what your budget was, I'm not sure what your budget was, I'm assuming it was very low because you had a deficit before. If you did not meet that, you would then be eating into your free cash, and you would also have a hit against your free cash or a deficit on your books for revenue deficit. So it would actually be a double hit for your community. So you want to be really careful to make sure that you can meet your budget that you set for yourself.
I think sometimes I think about like the cash flow in versus cash flow out. And so like, right, we can't say, oh, I said I was gonna spend this dollar and I have this dollar left over at the end. So that means I didn't spend this dollar. It could mean that I spent this dollar and then, and then eventually another dollar came back to me later on. So like, I think about things like, especially when we're budgeting for special ed, we can have students who are placed out of district, and it's a huge expense, or we know students who need a one-on-one aid, and we're taking money out of our reserves to help fund that. And then come March, that student moves out of district or something, and all of a sudden, like, it's not that we didn't spend the money. We had to spend so much of it up front, and then eventually we have savings that come. I don't think it's fair to think of it as like dollar to dollar, if that makes sense.
I'm actually trying to think about it more in kind of budgeting practice or philosophy than accounting. I'm not trying to do that.
I want to be careful about using the language like we said we were gonna spend this money and then we didn't, because I think that we often do spend the money and it comes back in different ways.
Well, I find comforting to hear that we're under the state cap of 5%. That was really helpful to hear.
Yes, so
Seems like that would be a
Because
plus.
sometimes the narrative is that we're hoarding money in reserves, but we're actually under that
Right, allowed
threshold.
amount.
you want to aim to be under that 5%, because if you reach that 5% or over, you need to return those funds to your member communities.
Yeah.
So.
Pam, I know you wanted to say.
I guess probably two clarifications from language used in the past. When we've talked about spending through reserves, school choice is what we're talking about. Because that does not have we can't regenerate funds that were gathered from the early 2000s. And that's what we are sitting on for reserves there. What we know now is we have spent all of our school choice. With that 1.5 million, 1.4 of it went to the fields. So that's a problem for April. On the E&D piece, I think we need to look less of it as, try to picture it less as spending reserve. We've set a budget. And what we're taking from E&D is a reduction to the towns of what they will need to pay to meet that budget. Because we've expressly used E&D to lower assessment. So the budget gets set and we make it manageable or help contribute to funding that budget by using a piece of E&D to drive down those assessments. We need those dollars flowing through because we would be cutting it way too close if we didn't have them. So we've taken the responsibility of pulling it from E&D, removing it as a liability to the towns, but it's still the cash flow that we need. Had we not recognized, I think it was $270,000 in that additional revenue that we did not see coming, it was from a spike in the interest rates. The picture would have been slightly different at the end of the year.
Can't count on that.
And you can't count on that one way or the other.
It was the opposite way last year, with negative
Right.
investment income.
What you're witnessing right now is us as a committee, we're trying to, so what we've learned is that we as a group, many of us feel like we want to understand the pieces of it so that we can then look at things from a policy perspective, but we need to understand what we're actually talking about here. So, but what we are dealing with, as Jake noted, is we have competing interests, and the idea of too close is arbitrary, and that we don't have a policy for it. And that's the wrestle that we're going through in conversation right now, and also with our town partners. So that's why we're really interested in some of the nitty gritty here. Because we're trying to figure out what is too close, how close is too close, and what is defendable, what is good practice, what makes sense for us as a district, as a standalone municipality, but, in a regional district with two town partners. So that's what we're working through.
I think they set the limit for a reason. And they don't want to have more than that, but I think they want to try to be as close to it as they can be, like, as accountants, we're conservative, we like to see reserves and unexpected things that happen, and you want to have reserves for that. And cities and towns have much bigger reserves, and got towns that are funding you so they can kind of help if they're, your reserves aren't sufficient, but I'm sure they would prefer not to. Have you come back for additional funds. So I think it is like a good practice to maintain, strong reserves.
And
A budget question, but I think that's something that we can work with Michelle later on. I think my question is about, I get that we are using the E&D numbers every year during the budget process to bring down the assessment. But while we're bringing down the assessment, we are having the high expense, so we are bringing down the assessment. In reality, we actually could reduce the expense. So when I look at the past 5-10 years, every year that our budget to actual at the end of the year, we have access at least 1%, if not more, some years more. So I get that we are using some of the E&D money to kind of fill the gap, but I think gap is a lot smaller than what we think during the budget process. Just my opinion.
yeah, that's the wrestle we're going through, because there are
That's
other
how close
opinions
is too
going the
close.
other direction.
Exactly. And
That's the
I have a question. So our policy team were trying to establish the E&D policy. But a lot of different districts and schools, they have the E&D at 5%. But if the 5% is a state law already, why have the policy internally? So some districts actually have a policy for 3%. Some of them went at 3%. Acton, Foxborough is 4%. Can you speak to a little bit about why some schools have the policy to have lower than the state guideline?
I think that in some cases, there was some maybe like distrust about school having too much for reserve at one point in time. And I don't think that is necessarily, still the case, but I think that there were people that came in, I think those are like extenuating circumstances where something was happening. They were having problems with the finances of the people like years ago. And they were trying to put controls in place to make things more transparent. And I think that's how they ended up there. I don't know about Acton Boxborough, is that the other one you mentioned?
Yeah.
They're at 4%. Yeah, I'm not sure what their rationale was for that. I've been auditing it at the minute, so I kind of know a little bit of the history of that one. But I wouldn't be surprised if that one went up. Like, I think it's just kind of stayed there and hasn't changed, but I don't really think that there's
So
really strong reason to have it at 3%.
another question, and maybe this is something legal would answer, or you address that, is, last year when we used the field to fund, we used the reserve to fund the field first, and then the town are reimbursing us. They haven't yet, but when they do reimburse,
I've done all of that homework.
okay,
It needs to go into stabilization.
even though it
School
was,
choice in, school choice out. You can't, only the state can deposit into the school choice fund. We can't redeposit into it. So we have a whole process. I talked to Michelle about it. I talked to Crichton about it, to double check, and we have to go through amending our budget. We're gonna do that in April, after the town meeting in Manchester, because they're gonna allocate their last amount of money to us. So we'll just do it all at once. That was one of those things at the beginning I was saying, I'm very interested in it. I think we can manage it, but I really want to wait for Michelle to make sure we cross all our Ts and dot all our Is. Because I don't trust I'm not that good with the details sometimes.
The basketball team won 72-30.
Yay, so there'll be another game. Good.
But they're in the playoffs.
Breaking news.
Anybody, Eddie, we would try and everybody by 6 inches. That was the report I got.
Do we have more questions about E and D? Again, you can see what we're wrestling with here.
Can I just, and not to put you on the spot, is our use of E and D typical?
I would say so. I would say most school districts use D&D in the budget process. Yeah.
And are you aware of any guardrails, or benchmark through which districts routinely decide how much you use?
Really, to be honest with you, we're not really involved in like, discussions or anything. It's more, what I think the policy is probably more around like what you're going to use it for, what your philosophy is on how you're going to use it. Like, do you want to balance your budget with D&D, and does that make sense? And
One way I can't play around is we have, as everybody said, we've been routinely using a portion of this to offset the assessments to the towns. But it's not like the rest of it, this was the analogy I was trying to draw to a savings account. It's not like the rest of it just gets set aside. I think what you're telling me is the rest of it is going to be the starting point in the for P&L the following year. So you're going to use all of your, I mean, you're using all of your E&D. It's not like, for instance, the school choice account, which stays and holds a fixed balance. You're using everything towards school expenses the coming year, right?
there's different ways to look at it. I think Michelle looks at it a little bit differently than I do. I look at it as more from like a fund balance perspective, like how you go from one year to the next. And to me, I think it's easier to understand. At least for me, it's easier to understand just by looking at the fund balances and kind of going, I do a lot of them, and that's kind of how I approach it. And it comes out right. If you come to the right number, it's math. And it comes out the way Michelle does it too.
I prefer your way, but I can't do it the other way.
Okay. But I mean, yeah, the budget to actuals come into play and how you did, but realistically, the numbers that hit the fund balance are the actuals. And so if you, budgeted $500,000 E&D, in order for you to break even on your P&L and have no effect on your fund balance, you actually have to have a $500,000 surplus between your revenues and your expenses. Because you budgeted a loss, you're budgeting to use reserve. You weren't getting a revenue for that, so you have a $25 million budget, you budget $1 million in E&D.
It seems to me so different than when this was focused on developing a policy for a reserve account. I think what most people have in mind is an account that is a fixed separate account, not something that's being routinely drawn upon. And it's so
Yeah,
we can further, we can have many more meetings about this. So I think I've gotten what, thank you for your
Yeah.
presentation.
I don't think of it as
I
like,
have not come to an answer in terms of how to draft a policy, but.
I don't really look at it as like a separate account, like the E&D account. It's like a component of your fund balance. So you've got your total fund balance, and then within there, you've got different things that are set aside for different purposes. Your debt reserve, the capital stabilization fund, for the financial statements, the capital stabilization fund is in the general fund, but that's capped. For your books, it's not, it's a separate fund. But so because it's in the general fund, we have to reserve that and have it on its own line, so it's not part of the unreserved, because that would artificially inflate your unreserved. And then the.
That was the question I was trying to ask, and I didn't do it the right way before. It's more than just our assessment dollars in from the town that B&D tracks.
Oh, yeah, it's everything.
It's everything.
It's all your revenues, it's all your expenses, so. I mean, if you have like the financials open and you went to page 16, you'll see the revenue and expense statement, and that's a statement that will get you from last year's ending balance to this year's ending balance. Then when you look at the balance sheet on page 14, you'll see the ending balances for this year. And if you go to the 22 balance sheet, you'll see the ending balances for 22. On page 16, will show you how you get from last year's balance to this year's balance. You got $37 million of revenue, $37 million of expense, and $279,000 decrease in fund balance. And so the financial statements can be confusing. The government financial statements is 3 different bases of accounting in here. And so if you look at the budget to actual schedule, you're going to see different numbers, and you're going to see what they call the fund-based financial statements. And then there's entity-wide financial statements. So I don't want to really confuse you. I probably don't want to get into all that, but I'm sure Michelle can explain it to you if you want to get into it sometime.
So I have a question about, when we talk about the capital, because it does impact our operating budget and the capital budget separately, and sometimes the reserve. So, so capital expenses, sometimes that we put things in the operating budget, like under a small cap, line. And then some we put it in the capital, budget. But I think the dollar threshold was what, 10,000 or something that we put in small cap, but in capital expense, sometimes there's things less than 10,000. Also in operating budget, we have the curriculum expense line, but we also have curriculum stuff in the capital budget. So what is the guideline about what goes in the operating budget versus what goes in the capital budget? Because sometimes that we are moving things, I feel like sometimes we're moving things, just trying to also balance the bottom line as well. In both pools. But what's right?
I don't know, Michelle might be a better one to answer this one because she deals with that more than I do. But usually in the capital budget, I see the debt service. And so you're saying that you're budgeting other things?
So we also have like
We
the
have kind
library
of our
books.
everyday language about the budget, and
Yeah.
then there's the real accountant's language about the budget. So the capital budget from from your perspective and from the world's perspective is that separate set of documents that monitors or accounts for all of our debt, all of the mortgages on the buildings is what I call them, and what we owe every year and what we pay. When we talk about capital, we're talking about consumables end up in the operating fund. If we do a large scale adoption, like when we bought Wonders, we would put that in it doesn't fit anywhere, but it's a capital investment and we might pay for it over 3 years. So we'll put that in what we call the small cap, larger cap lines in the operating budget. So I'm looking at Michelle so she understands. So we have like a facilities and facilities capital in like curriculum and technology capital. They're supposed to be $100,000. They're underfunded. They're funded at about 50%. But that's where we put the things that Essex can't fit on its line item in its school budget. So we'll do a large investment one time and then pass the consumables to the schools after. Same with facilities. If you need a boiler replacement, it's on our small cap. It's on our capital plan investment list. Once things get into like over 10 and into 50, we have to multi-year plan for them. So that's when we would hit the stabilization account for capital investments. So Anna's right, from an accountant's perspective, there's a whole lot of language that flies around and it doesn't maybe feel like there's rules. But it is a little bit about balancing each of the school level budgets with what they can bear, because you'd have like 50% increase in a school budget if you tried to put a whole, set of reading curriculum purchase in that budget in its initial year. So we put that at the district level and the set aside money we have for that type of investment annually. And then when things get really big, they go into that long-term capital plan. So like we have the $250,000 investment in the smart board replacement process. That's going to go on a multi-year plan and it's going to come out of stabilization. So I know why it sounds like we're all over the place.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of logic behind it, but you're right. Part of it is to balance all of the budgets and to basically acknowledge that we're too small to make $100,000 purchase out of our operating budget. We need to fund it, either over time or some other place. So sorry, it's confusing.
Another thing that's been talked about quite a lot, among the community is when the END is filed. So we haven't been filed an END on the due date, but is that okay? Is that not okay? Or is that just a recommendation? We actually have grace period.
Not everybody files on time, and it's good too. I mean, some audits don't start until November. There are some that don't start until December. The DOR is pretty flexible. They try to have a deadline so that communities, they want people to file on time if they can, but realistically, not everybody's audit can be done at that point. So you don't have to wait for your audit to do it. So that's another thing, but a good number of the school districts do wait. They, they have the auditors help them out with it. Others just do it on their own before the audit. They say, probably one of those. So you probably won't be waiting to get your E&D done. I mean, it can start to be a problem if you're too late, because then the state will start to threaten to hold back your state aid. And people usually get it done really fast once they get that letter.
And we've been in that position, right?
Yeah.
The preliminary number's been done, so the whole exercise that you mapped out on these sheets is done. But we're behind in prepping everything for the audit, so the audit isn't done, so we don't get the official certification till later in the year. And that had just been a routine. You've been part of that routine. And we've had that recommendation for years about reorganizing and better staffing the business office. So I think what we're seeing with the reorganization and now that final piece in with the payroll support is that our production level is up and we've been able to tighten up everything, including our state reporting. It's another area we would be late because the one person who had to physically onboard everyone and then turn over all the healthcare was the same person who was trying to do the end of year report at the same time. And there just wasn't enough time in the day. So we have been, I think, actively working on this for years to try to tighten things up. We're there. Michelle's going to inherit a nice, tight, well-organized system. And I think we have goals to get the reporting done even sooner.
There's really not, you really don't have to wait for the audit to get it done if your reports are closed and everything's in good shape and you know how to do it.
Will they certify about the audit?
Yes.
But in this year's example, like the prepaid 157, if we were to file on time and then during the audit, that you said that we're supposed to reverse that, then what happens to the E&D one? Yeah, what happens?
I think Michelle would have turned out.
Yeah.
Or it happens.
Right, it wouldn't happen.
I don't know, it was a chaotic time at the end of last June.
But she most likely she caught it. If she didn't, then the DOR may or may not have
Yeah,
caught
they
it.
do.
If they caught it, then they would have said, oh, you know what, we're gonna have to deduct this from your E&D. But there's a chance that they might not have caught it.
I think they would.
Yeah. Probably because they tied it down with the state.
I have one other question. I'm sorry. This is an uncomfortable question, but it's something we're dealing with. Occasionally it comes up in conversation, with contentious budget circumstances, as we go through the budget process and everybody is finding the ways to be concerned. And occasionally, things will be thrown about like, well, they've had the same auditor for however many years, for all of these many years. I'm someone personally who sees value in building a relationship and having that consistency. That's a conversation, decision, that sort of thing. I'm not saying we're deciding anything, but I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to, how you overcome the idea in building relationships with districts that you work with or clients that you work with, overcome the idea of you really need a new set of eyes right now, or at some point. Just what would you say to that? And I'm not saying you're trying to like fight your job here, but this is something that's come up in conversation at this table and outside of this table.
Yeah, I mean, there's different schools of thought on it. Some, feel that there is value to having the same auditor and someone that you have relationships with and that really understands how you do things and does this type of work, has a lot of experience in it. And another question that sometimes gets asked is, it always seems to come up with auditors and accounting, but it doesn't come up with legal. It's like, if you're happy with your law firm, do you, go out and change for the sake of change, just to get, if they're doing a good job and representing you well, and you're happy with their service, you go out and select a new law firm just for the sake of change. And so we kind of look at it that way too. But some of our clients, if they're getting pressure to change, we can change partners too. That's an option, and they'll get a different set of eyes. So if you did have an inkling to change, that's another way to get change without actually changing firms. And then the other thing is that we just did merge with Markham too, so there's going to be, some changes to the way we do things. We're going to be adopting some of Markham's procedures, and they basically kind of have their way of doing things. We had our way of doing things. There's a lot of similarities, but there's some differences too. So we're going to be looking at things a little bit differently than we had in the past, just because of the merger with Markham. So I think there's going to be some change just as a result of that. Those are a few things.
Thank you for entertaining my uncomfortable question.
No problem. It comes up every now and then.
Does anyone else have questions? All right, I would like to close this one by saying not only thank you, I'm sure we all thank you. So this is my 6th year paying attention to the audit. And every year that management letter shrinks. And every year I find these quotes like, your budget is structurally sound, good controls over spending, and don't see many fully funded rates because you were proactive. You were one of the first districts, not even many towns, clean opinion. And I just want to say thank you for your professional opinion on that. And thank you to Pam and to Avi for your hard work. And as you mentioned, I mean, central office was the Pam and Avi show for a while and needed some reorg, and it's built and improved the management notes over time. And we're seeing the results. So from that relationship of trust that you have together as well. So it can't go unnoted that now we've done a lot here.
We're working up Maslow's hierarchy of need,
Yeah.
and we're starting to get to the upper echelons now. So I think hopefully we're going to keep tightening things as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to be able to do. Yep.
So now we're on to it does appear that the game is over, but I don't know that many of us planned, and our children are actually in this building waiting to be brought home. So I would suggest we stick with the plan of relocating things and finish with Heather and then Pam. Is everyone in support of that for tonight? Yes. Okay. Hearing no objection, I'm going to move on that. Thank you, Frank. Good night.
Bye.
Can we
Well,
do,
not to be able to be cheering for them, but so excited to hear the outcome for the basketball team. So
Really great.
can we make sure, can we at least take up the district calendar for next year? even if we don't vote.
Yeah, no, you still have a couple critical things that, and that's one of them. Yeah.
Okay.
I do have a slide with bullet points, but they're really easy and I'm gonna be brief. So just sharing a few updates to keep you in the loop about the good stuff happening around our district. Want to share that we have reestablished the Manchester-Essex Regional School District Wellness Advisory Committee. So we are up and running. We had our first meeting last week. It's a great mix of staff and community members who really are all approaching it with broad representation across health and wellness, physical education, nutrition, and coming with this like great drivers and perspectives about how do we take care of our learning community. So we started by digging into taking that initial first pass, looking at our wellness policy. What does that mean and look like in alignment to criteria that we're going to have to approach? This will be a long-term process. So we just got started, but the committee is awesome, and I'm lucky that I get to co-chair it with the Dean of Students at the middle school, Kim Provo, who's also our social emotional learning curriculum coordinator for the district. So it was a great launch, got a chance to get to know each other, and started digging in. Another point that I'm really excited to share is we were awarded another grant. I'm thrilled to share with you that in partnership with high school department chair and Cal Baker, Coach of the Year, Lauren DuBois, she and I wrote a grant for the genocide education grant. So this actually makes sure that we're in compliance with the 2021 law, Chapter 98, for those interested in exploring, which requires genocide education in middle school and high school. It's really developmentally and age appropriate, but making sure that we're meeting that criteria. This grant that we were awarded for $30,000 will actually get to use over this year and next year. And the components of the grant are going to allow us to do a few different things. We're actually getting to purchase curricular resources and materials from sound vendors. Some of that includes texts, whether they're texts that might be read in English class or even picture books that are really talking about inclusion and awareness of other groups of humans up through getting into more difficult and complex topics as we go up through the ages. So that we again, that elementary, middle, and high. We're also investing in training and professional development opportunities, some that are actually going to get started in the spring for our staff. The grant will cover some student learning experiences, both going out into the field and also to bring speakers in. Some internal stipended work to review classes that already exist to see where we can do some curriculum rewriting and revision to ensure we're meeting the criteria, and some partnerships. So we continue to work with Primary Source, who's a great leading organization in the state, continue to work with ADL and some other organizations we're looking at partnering with. So exciting, more to come on that. The student academic support, just keeping you in the loop. We were able to, I know last time I was disappointed, but now I'm excited to share, we were able to fund, we got creative and things to with our help. We were able to use some of our remaining SR3 funds to provide additional and expand that high dosage tutoring at Essex. So students in grades 3, 4, and 5 at Essex are receiving that high dosage tutoring. The newest addition here is we're working with Catapult Learning, who's targeting, and we picked critical learning areas of need. So there's some math groups and some literacy groups that'll be doing it to supplement and continue to support the academic learning and the continuation of the work in 4th and 8th through that the DESE work that have been in math. And we also just launched the summer literacy program in partnership with the YMCA. That is also being used to target and support students who might be struggling in foundational literacy skills, and in utilizing our diagnostic assessments to target those students. This is a completely free opportunity, and it's an invitation-based for priority grades to give the students a balance of targeted intervention utilizing our Wonders 2020 resources and our assessment. And then they also get a chance to go and play and have camp and fun, and if their food and camp and transportation all covered from the Y. So we're working on rolling that out as well. The next piece I wanted to name is the STEAM Showcase, and that is on the next slide as well. Just want to shout it out and invite the entire community to come. The math and science chair, Christine Milley, really worked hard across the community to expand it. So it's actually a district-wide K through 12, pre-K through 12 showcase. It has over 20 external vendors, at least 20 internal tables of hosted different groups that are sharing and showcasing across the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. There are going to be art displays of different ages and groups. There's going to be live music performances from our talented musicians. And in partnership with the math project, it's actually a food truck that has a benefit of giving money back to support the program. So it should be a really wonderful night taking place in the upper cafeteria here and at the downstairs gym. So we hope that anyone from the community who's interested in a really good evening comes out to join March 27th, 5 to 7 p.m. And just a quick preview to let you know, in the future, whether it's the next monthly update or beyond, I'm excited to share a little preview. We've been working on a lot on AI with our internal technology team, so I'm excited to share some of the work we've been doing that'll come. And the ongoing work that's been taking place for the history and social science curriculum review. We just actually had a meeting today, so we'll be getting a really thorough, comprehensive report back. And then also results from the work from the Arts Council, which we have a meeting tomorrow. That'll be coming up. So that's on the docket. Oh my God.
Questions on this? Go ahead.
I have one question, and it's related, it's not actually this one, but
Okay.
you mentioned the summer literacy program.
Yes.
One question that I received, which of course is not really a spoken question, but I'll voice it to you, is whether there is thought to returning to summer. That was traditionally part of students' experience here at some point, and maybe it was COVID related, it was taken off.
Do you know what level that they're at? Who's asking? Elementary, middle?
Middle
I
school.
thought it at high school, yeah.
So I can speak. I did just meet with the principal leadership team at the middle school, and they are looking at revising their summer literacy. So I know that work took place tomorrow or it's tomorrow. They're spending some time looking at that at the middle. Outside of that, I'm not sure, so I can look into it. Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions on this? STEAM Showcase was a great ad last year.
I know, and it's even more broad in the fabulous work that I also showed the Essex community for the wonderful work that they had done with their STEAM and the parent organizers who had done a lot of work to that previous years met early this fall with Christy, Millie, and I to talk about what it would look like to merge, and they were so generous to share the different organizations and volunteers they had worked with. So you're going to see a lot of that, the Essex traditional groups brought right into this group and a lot of merged learning opportunities. So it's pretty great.
And butter biscuit is really amazing. Not before. So, you weren't gonna come for that one.
You really should.
Any other questions for Heather on this?
My questions.
Will you stay for a minute?
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk a little bit about,
Yeah.
we had curriculum spotlights scattered throughout the calendar this year, and it was good to bring it up last time. I talked to Heather, and if you are all open to it, we thought we could condense down to 2 and focus on what she's working on this year. And that would be history and social science and the arts, and we'll look at our calendar to try to fit into the spring. Any objection to that?
That's sensible, given what we have before us.
And it's on everybody's plate.
Are there chances you're bringing recommendations to us for significant changes, or is it more an update on kind of the work that's happening? And I'm not asking that you say that now, but it just may influence kind of how much time we need.
I think the purpose of them is to educate here and at home what a K-12 strand looks like and what the current work is in that area, not necessarily any specific recommendations.
What it might be is actually our internal action plan to keep you in the loop about what next steps might be. It might not require a school committee approval or action, but to continually keep you in the loop about what steps we might be taking as well. So, yeah.
And that makes sense to me.
Hearing no objection, we say yes.
Okay.
That's the line for tonight. But will you stick around for
I'll
questions
stick
about
around.
calendar?
Yep. So want to go to calendar next?
Yeah. Right.
Forgive my to-dos.
We can work.
Well, you have the calendar. I don't know that it's really going to be all that helpful to put it up because it's a series of small boxes, only a couple of which I can show at one time. Yeah, it's in the
Yeah,
packet. Everybody had it to look at. I don't think there was any too many substantive changes since last time. Kate did have some questions. We can review them here tonight. But the process with the district calendar is, this year it's changed a little bit from past years in terms of the organization of the report card dates and the addition of a few release days. But for the most part, it's the same basic structure from year to year. So it's been through PDC for a few iterations. It went to executive committee of MEDA, the Teacher Association, for their review. They're set with it. So now it's on this group. If you have comments, questions, or concerns, we can address them. If we address them satisfactorily, you can vote to approve it tonight. If not, we can bring it back on the 9th.
So yeah. Well, let's, if we're, I mean, do we want to do this by way of motion since we had this last time to consider, or do we want to ask clarifying questions first? Let's ask clarifying questions first. Okay, do you have some?
Yeah, so I remember a year ago, we talked about the Columbus Day. So right now you have both names, both terms, I should say. So is that how it's gonna be, or you're waiting for us to make a decision on what the term should be?
I think that's what we decided last year, isn't it?
I think we didn't have the time or energy to take it up in the moment, because this has been on the docket for a few years now.
Right.
Um,
And I think
this is like the best of both worlds at the moment until we have the time and space to address it, because there's a broader conversation to be had there about it.
the DESI site still refers to it as Columbus Day. So I think we had a piece of advice at one point, just continue on with however DESI names it. That gives us Columbus Day. I think given our work on cultural competency and our awareness has led us to want to be more inclusive and use Indigenous Peoples Day. So I think that's how we ended up with the blended solution. I don't think it needs to be an in-depth study group. I think it's one of those things that we just need to make a decision on and move forward. If it's nothing, this works for the group, we can leave it at this. If we want to go to Indigenous people, I would just make a motion and see where we go.
I would suggest that we consider not doing that without advance warning as an agenda item, though, based on conversations that came last time we discussed it. So if that's the case, I'm personally comfortable with leaving it as is. If someone would like to make a motion, now is the time. Hearing no motion, let's leave it to for now. And then if someone would like to take this up at another time, let us know and we'll put it on as an agenda item so that the public can be notified and make their commentary as needed. Do you want to have it? Do you have any questions or comments to linger with, or?
I think they're more discussion for, after a motion is made.
Okay. Then I will move to accept the MERSD 24-25 calendar as drafted, as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
So we have moved from eight professional development early release days to 11. Now, I remember, not allowed to say that, so I can't say that I remember that. I guess I'm interested in how we got here and how necessary this is, given our concurrent conversation about school attendance and the importance of having kids at school. And I feel like we are sending a mixed message when we have so many disjointed weeks between holidays and early release days and conference days and professional development days. It just feels to me disjointed. I think that we had gotten used to, maybe gotten used to is not the right word. I think it felt more digestible when we had when we had sort of lumped them into those long weekends in the fall. And I had heard from families that they were using those for things like hiking or foliage trips or whatever. the way that the early release days are distributed now, I think it's more difficult for families to manage. I think it presents more of a childcare concern and more of a scheduling concern.
But is this because of union agreement?
No.
No,
No?
it's not.
Request from the Professional Development Committee to add 3 additional early release days to help facilitate the amount of work that they need to get done next year in terms of collaboration and support for the NEASC at the elementary level. And just feeling that there really isn't enough time to cover everything that there is to get done.
This is 3 in addition to last year. So it's a change of 3. And those days do not subtract from the technical days on learning. So we could double it and it'd still be 100.
No, because it's hour, there's also an hourly, you have to spend a certain number of hours learning also.
Yeah, I don't.
There are a lot of districts that will have a weekly early release. You know, I know Ipswich and Oklahoma, writing all have every week, it's an early release one of the days. We're not in that situation that we need to that extent. So technically, yes, you could, but.
We ran the numbers last year on having the every Wednesday early release. We were pushing close
At the high school level.
at the high school, but the additional 3 will not put us in any jeopardy.
I'm less concerned about the requirement as I am
I
about.
just wanted to, like, I hadn't realized that, so I appreciate you raising it, Kate. It wasn't obvious to me to look at this, so it is different, and I just wanted to understand how it differed from the impact.
So on that note, let me ask then, so how this came to be was it was a correct request from the BDC based on the amount of work. Should we expect that then the following year, 11 is now baseline? Or should we, is this a unusual year coming up given the NEASC and everything else?
Just clarification, is this extra time or is it just redistributed time?
No, it's extra.
Extra
It's
time.
3 additional early release days.
I definitely agree with Kate that early release days present a childcare challenge for 2 families that we are constantly hearing about. We'll hear about it a lot more. With more, I do appreciate, and I know it's true that some districts have every week. A part of me thinks that is in many senses I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but there is a consistency and an ability to plan for it that doesn't exist when these come about somewhat haphazardly. So I do have concerns that that's, we will hear about it, but I also appreciate. Yeah, can you, the NEASC, and so is it different from what it's been in the past?
When we have NEASC at the secondary, we built in additional time for them. We increased the number of release days at the high school. The high school used to have fewer release days than elementary. So now at the elementary.
But then the high school.
Yeah,
Not having,
No,
so they held on to those.
so where we were last year is ideally, we would have a weekly release. I get the next year. Recommendation from the professional development committee, which is on. They're asking for time next year to meet all of their needs around cross-district collaboration, curriculum mapping, training, and in addition, the NEASC review, it's the collaborative process that they need to get together and work together on. The committee can say no and send it back to the committee for review. If it chooses to.
Okay, if I add to that? I was also been hearing, I've also heard from, the Professional Development Committee, which is the teacher committee with being appointed membership to represent teachers, but also been hearing from building leaders who are trying to find the time to do the wide range of tasks, both with training staff on any new work that we're trying to do, also maintaining, content level or building level targeted need. There is the unique challenge of when you do have vertical groups that might have, if you're having groups within the arts, it's not something that you can do during staff times because the release times are different. So there are certain circumstances that you can really only tackle when you're looking at their early release days. And then when you have competing interests, that might be a level-based need. For example, when you ask versus a vertical department need, and you have those people like, this is the only way to do it, so which one is more important? It is all important. So there's a little bit of that, finding that balance, to make sure we're meeting the needs of the district initiatives, building-based initiatives, and then things that might require vertical collaboration and connection. And so it was feeling taxed this year. Pam has named the elementary intensity, but it's certainly not only always there. So this was a proposal to try to address that challenge of continuing to move forward in that professional learning and that collaboration space. While our staff are trying to find time in the margins, and sometimes it's release time from the classroom. So it might be happening, but during the day with coverage, and could this ease some of that challenges that the principals are working hard with their teachers to find that time to make sure they're protecting that opportunity for their professionals.
Jake?
I'll just add, I think we are putting more out on their plates next year in particular. And this is what they're telling us we need. Even, you know, I don't know that it sets an expectation as a baseline, but I think for next year in particular, the context should be accounted for.
I'm with you on that. I feel like we've asked people to ask for what they need, and they're asking for what they need. I do think that there is a good point to be made. Kate someone actually pointed this out to me, that there's only 1-2 week span on this proposed calendar that are 2 consecutive full weeks without a holiday or an early release. So I would say that I am in favor of this because it is the teachers and the PDC asking for what they need. But when it comes to next year's calendar, I would really hope that they'd be considering, is that going to be necessary for the following year? And if we're really looking at this, maybe we do need to consider something more consistent, because a half day every Wednesday that our neighbors have doesn't mean they're getting out at 11:45. But it's frequently like 1:10. So it's a different.
The Ipswich model, and it's like a 1 o'clock.
Right. So I would say if we're going to be increasing these numbers and 11 becomes the baseline, I would ask them to maybe consider that or something moving forward, because we can't.
So how many of the 11 early release days are led by administration or planned by administration or outside organizations that come in?
All but three are teacher.
So this coming year, that's 5 early release days that are district or building teacher directed.
No, 8.
No, there's 8 days to be teacher directed, so they should have 5 days.
Right, this year.
This year, yep, so next year it'd be the same thing, there'll be 3 days teacher directed, so they need to expand the number of days that could be
That are district
Yep.
led.
district really leader.
Go ahead.
I agree that if this is what the teachers and what everybody needs to do their job, I pretty much support it. The only thing I'll ask her is, I know that my kids telling me, when there's a half day, a lot of times, if they are getting out at 11 or 11:45, they don't really do much in that day. They end up watching movies to do something, and I just feel like they are not really getting what they should be learning, especially when it's only half day. And so I just want to encourage whoever to really utilize those half days.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And in keeping with that, was there any thought given to either, as Kate suggests, maybe attaching these to a weekend or to doing full days, fewer full PD days, because it isn't as disruptive and it does ensure that the days that students are there are maximized, the content.
Working backwards through the questions. If we add more full PD days, we're going to extend the work year. So we'll have to compensate for additional work days.
Well,
Right now it's a 180, 184, or 180 student year, 184 teacher year. If we reduce a student day, we have to add, so we have to add days to the calendar to achieve more full PD days. Because we would toss that around. That will be expensive. The release days are an imperfect solution, but it allows us to account for the day, not extend the year and extract some time. I do think we didn't get as far as we would have liked to last year with the Ipswich model concept. I think that's something we should revisit next year to see if there's a way to be more systematic. I think Fridays have been, I think while it works for families and we've tried to accommodate that, it's not the most opportune for rolling up your sleeves and digging in on a new initiative or training issue at, noon on a Friday. In terms of sustaining people's interest and attention.
I can understand that, but when we're looking at 11 days that we are inconvenienced, and I don't want to underscore the work that's going on, right? Inconveniencing makes it sound petty, and I know that that's not, I know that there is important work that's going on, but we are asking our community members to have their children out of school for 11 half days throughout the school year, which is more than one a month. Then I don't feel like it's asking too much to ask that some of those days occur on days that are more convenient for families.
We can take that back to PDC.
Well, there's a motion on the table. We do have to vote.
But if you need to go back and change some of the days and we can vote.
Well, I don't
We
know
would
if we're
have to
going to
vote it
agree.
down.
I don't know if Mito will agree, because we did bring that back a year or two ago and we didn't get agreement on Fridays.
So we're gonna
But
be
we're
voting
adding.
yes or no on
Right.
this. Yeah. And then if we vote it down, then.
Yeah, we'll take it back.
Anyone else want to offer last comments, or do we want to do a straw poll before we do this, or do we just ready to take a vote?
I will offer the last comment that I maybe missed it, but I didn't realize that the calendar included this change because I didn't see it.
Yep.
In contrast to last year, so right now I'm feeling kind of torn because I think Kate's raising some good points that if I thought about them, I might have had a few more questions for Pam in advance.
Can I highlight, there's two other areas of change that I would consider a significant conversation. One of the pieces that you're gonna notice is the proposal on this draft calendar actually shifts when the K-8 parent conferences are. This shift is recommended to take place, it would happen after the parents receive the report cards. So they're slightly later than the original ones. The feedback from teachers on the professional development committee was that it actually the positive and what times they would have the conference with the parent, then a couple weeks later, they get their reports and they would have a bunch of parents. So can we come back and meet? We have questions. Report cards and sometimes and then what does that mean? Can take a conversation. So we're data point as something to ground the conference, not be the only point, but a piece of the conference. So that is a change from this current practice, which is conference taking place before the report card release. The other change of significance is the full day PD, which had previously been scheduled in November. From my understanding, over time, it has taken place in the fall, it's taken place in January, and it's currently proposed in March. So that piece is, and it was moved, and it's, I don't remember, was it a Monday this year, Pam, or Friday?
So 17.
It was proposed next year for the 17th. I think this year it was a Friday, and so the feedback from the professional development committee was that by starting something on a Monday, we got to get you up really like, have you feeling that positive connection, collaboration, and energy from your colleagues and staff, and then launch you into that week in a positive way. So it's a shift of when in the week and also.
Also, that day, when it was in January, had been tacked on to Martin Luther King Day weekend, and then when it was in November, had been tacked on to Veterans Day weekend.
Not this year for the November one.
This year for the November one, it was.
And that's a conference day.
We had a conference day.
Oh, the conferences, yes,
Oh,
yep, sorry.
was it not-
The full day.
It's a conference. K conference.
When we brought it over, and that was,
October 6th.
which was Columbus Day.
Oh, right, right.
It was a holiday weekend.
It was a holiday weekend.
So I'm hearing you say it's preferential for the parents to have them attached to long weekends or Fridays.
It appears that way. I mean, there's 7 of us sitting here, so it appears that way.
I'm not in any way suggesting that the schedule for important week work that our teachers are doing be tailored to what is most
I didn't take it that
convenient
way.
to parents. But I do feel as though there needs to be some sort of give and take in acknowledging that this many half days. And then it's 11 half days and then plus 2 more half days for conferences, plus another full day for conferences. And sprinkled is disruptive to a family's schedule. And I think that there are compromises that we could make that I don't think it has to be one or the other. I hope that it doesn't.
I'm hearing it. I just think could wrap it up, send it back to the committee.
Sorry.
No, I mean, we can wrap up the list of things for them to look at, send it back to the committee for them to ponder and consider. And then we'll take it up again on the 19th. I'm hearing it. We've done it both ways. We've presented it both ways. We can go back and look at it again on the bracket.
Andrew, did you have something?
Yeah, for the conferences, for middle school and high school, from what I know, it is optional, right? That you get, the teacher will recommend if you wanna, go, if you need to come in or not. So my point is, will the conference days be shortened? If the participation is not like, 100% participation for all the parents and all the kids, then can one of the half days or some of the half days, whatever it needs to be done on the conference day?
Good suggestion.
Well, I would, yeah, it would be interesting to see how many, I would be interested to know how many parents are signing up for.
I haven't signed up.
And it's totally very, very.
Right. And so it would be interesting to have that data to determine.
Rather.
So are we looking, and don't take, this isn't meant to be flipped, but do we have the reverse problem with that, which is if we attach them to Fridays, it's an up.
We have it, well, I. As an option now. Which has been.
It's attached to the packet. Are we not setting ourselves up for bringing people in because?
All right. We're not ready.
Well,
We're not ready. We're not ready.
Well, hold on, no, we're going to vote on this, so we do have some options. My final question in discussion here is, do you have a recommendation on this?
I would like it to go back to PDC for further consideration, given the input. Like, we didn't have this input for this interim period. So we thought everything was okay. So I think we need to take it back. I don't have a recommendation.
Okay, so your recommendation is we can,
My recommendation is we need further review.
got it. So with
I would
that,
also, I'm interested, and this is really just throwing a thought out because it is something that I know is done in other districts where some half days are mornings. Like so it's a delayed.
let's don't
around those forms. I'm not advocating for it or not, I'm just,
Is that easier for childcare though?
I don't know.
Then it's the same.
Totally depends. I think if you'll get split votes. It works great for some, it's gonna be horrible for others, depending on the age of your kids. You know,
My other son.
If you
has
haven't
late
ever heard me
start
say that-
Monday every week.
district calendar is my
Crazy.
favorite thing every year. It's almost a no-win situation. We're not going to come up with a formula that meets everybody's needs. So I think we need to try to come up with something that integrates all of the feedback. I don't know how we don't make it look more sprinkled or more disjointed by trying to integrate all of the pieces, but we can take another stab at it.
At least it's great for the local economy because a lot can go across the.
Oh my God.
Rich did. Okay, so the motion on,
Can I ask can I ask a clarifying
Please.
question? Is the hardship, wrong word, is the impact greater for Essex elementary parents due to the fact that there isn't as extensive an after-school program option? Is that,
Yes, and there are fewer places for them to go.
Essex Elementary doesn't let out when the whole school goes downtown.
Right, I would agree with that.
well, there's also a lot of the,
So,
we've talked before that we have a lot going on with Manchester Parks and Rec that works right out of Memorial, so it may not be your cup of tea, but it's there. There's, there's the Hornet, Helpful Hornets, there's the state, there's the child care after school, and there's all the activities,
You
so.
often can't get into those on half days, just, like, I'm not saying, I understand that Essex doesn't have that option at all, but there are still Manchester families that don't have the option.
Okay.
Or do we have what we need to take a vote? So the motion on
What
the
does
floor,
Marblehead do? Just,
since we're here.
We only have a handful of half days, and we do have a YMCA run our after school program, so they can go to the perfect store.
Wish Essex had a Parks and Rec. Okay, do we have what we need to, so the motion on the table is to presented, we could choose to do that. Go down, but do we have what we need?
table it too.
What's the difference functionally?
to especially request that the PD committee.
I think we've just
So I
done,
make a motion to table this vote until Pam comes back with a recommendation.
Is there a second? Okay. Discussion on that motion. I feel like we should just put our names on the vote. If we want the PDC to revisit this because we don't like it, I'm willing to say that.
It's not that I don't like it or I think we've raised enough issues. I would vote yes for it right now, but we've raised enough issues that it's worth a second conversation.
Yeah.
I'm in keeping with Jake, if you put me on the line and said, I would recommend this as the work of the PDC, and then say, we've got a lot of innovative ideas, and let's try to figure out a whole different way of doing it next year. I think we can take another stab at it and see if we can come back with something that's in keeping with the discussion now. So, but if you want to vote it down, that's fine.
We're already in the motion.
Well, so we're in the motion right now to table this versus voting on it. All in favor of tabling the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, that's, are you a hack? What is it?
I don't understand.
We're taking a pause, we're gonna come back with a new version.
That's 4. The motion carries. We will table this until next time.
Thank you. If anybody wants to, if you didn't get a chance to formalize, or if you didn't notice changes and have other thoughts and want to get those to me, I can definitely put those back to the PDC. We'll be back.
And just
Thank you.
before we leave it, we focus mostly on the professional development pieces that Heather's been working with PDC on there. Are we still comfortable with the 2-week vacation at
Right.
the holiday
Love
period?
that.
Are all of the other technical pieces okay and
I
not
think you've got enough.
Okay.
I feel like,
If there's any other.
yeah, at this point, now that we're all kind of aware, maybe we can all make a commitment to take a look, and if we actually care about anything else, to send that input within the next couple days rather than 2 days before the next meeting. Okay, yeah, no, you're the only one who noticed it. Okay, the other time critical piece here for you is school choice, right, Pam?
Yeah, and it's, I will bring up my quick supers update, and kind of just, I want to just affirm what I think I know, but I don't want to go too far before double check. All right, a couple of quick updates. First, I'm just going to let you know. Thank you, everyone who made time to come and meet the 2 candidates. We had the 2 finalist site visits last Wednesday and yesterday for Essex Elementary, 2 great, highly qualified candidates, collecting feedback on it right now. I'm hopeful to make a decision within the next couple of days, but absolutely we'll have an announcement by next Monday. Sometimes it's just trying to get everybody I need to talk to on the phone to complete my due diligence. But
that's moving along as planned, on schedule, and we're really excited about the potential for Essex going forward. So keep an eye out for that. Now, the school choice piece, I just want to affirm that we had spoken this about the game plan for enrollment up to 20 to 24 student potential grade 6 for grade that we're prepared to do. Yeah, last Friday. Altogether, so those numbers are ticking back up. My goal is to hold the lottery on Monday.
For people who are panicking, listening to this, when it says no K to 5 slots available, does that exclude siblings?
We are only, yes, it excludes all elementary slot. There are no seats going out at the elementary school, only 6, 7, 8, and 9. We're looking at 5 to 6 students per grade level. There's a mass communication that goes out to all people who, now that I've confirmed that this is what I heard and we're all on the same page, the mass notification goes out tomorrow, letting everybody know that if you put an application in, we'll only be drawing seats for grades 6 through 9. If something should change, we'll notify you later in the year. And then we'll notify siblings immediately and then pull a lottery for the remainder.
Okay, any other question?
Budget an extra 100,000, would that imply just 20?
We also have to replace the graduating seniors.
Okay,
20 new.
20 new slots. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're talking total including replacements.
5 per grade level, 6, but that's 20, right?
That's
And then 6 if there's room.
6, 7, 8.
6, if there's room.
I did some.
Because of the graduates, because of the graduates.
Not their kids. Should have this one.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I told, someone asked me when the deadline was to, have the forms and give the deadlines. Should have this one. It's like daily forms.
My recollection of the conversation was I suggested 5 per grade level and it was like, well, if you can get 6 in, go for the.
I remember that.
So I think we're gonna look at it and see if where the
Yeah.
numbers are now, where the heads are. There's room for one more.
Class.
All right.
Yeah, like there's a specific class that.
Are you not remembering it that way? I'm
not
remembering
I
that.
just remembered it from a budget perspective, that we
Yeah.
said 20.
Yeah.
But that would be 20 new, and if we have some replace,
Yeah.
that makes that.
But I do, yeah. But we've already voted.
Yeah, I
We're
just-
done with this.
I'm,
Okay. I
I'm
just wanna
gut
make
checking,
sure.
like, this is
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
had written
Yep.
my notes, this is what I've been working on. Before we go into a lottery, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay.
That's it. Is that your update?
No, I can't get the page. I'm gonna go fast though.
Do you, in the lottery, I know it's blind for most things, but is there gender? Like if you have a class that's 80% boys? No, blind to that.
That's an interesting question.
There's a couple classes.
I know there are,
Things we
it is funny how the,
Yeah, no,
I
it's,
don't know what's
it's,
going on.
we tape it, everyone is assigned a number and the number goes into literally a hat and then we pull the numbers and then go through the list and.
Oh my gosh, really?
Really hat, really.
I would have thought that. you could
Sometimes we-
fancy it.
No, we use the hard hat when the building project is going on. Sometimes we use the baseball hat, whatever's available. It's fun. So speaking about building projects, I was really excited. We have kicked off the letter of interest period for people as a building committee. Letters are going to be collected until the 22nd. The facilities subcommittee will convene. We're going to use the same process we did. We review the letters. In some cases, we brought some people in to talk to them, interview them. That group will then recommend a full slate to the school committee and bring that forward on April the 2nd. And that vote will make that team official. That can get submitted to MSBA, and then we'll start to think about scheduling some initial meetings. I think there was a significant lag time from when we formed the committee, when we met the first time.
Yes.
Like spring to the fall. But at least we can probably have a Zoom to get everybody oriented and thinking about things. The facilities group also talked a little bit about the feasibility study, and the goal is to hold a facility subcommittee meeting on the 15th and invite anyone from the two towns who is going to be participating in structuring the feasibility vote for the upcoming town meetings to join in, so we can talk to them about the specific language that we need to use and what we think the estimate will be, and confirm our understanding of how the three-way split works. From last time, my recollection is we divided it 3 ways. Manchester-Essex Regional picked up a third. The additional 2/3 were combined and then divided through the apportionment formula. But that's what I want to run through with Brendan and Greg at that meeting, just to be sure that that's how we did it, and that's how it's understanding. Which, based on what MSBA shared with me from most recent, and I shared with the facility subgroup, the most recent feasibility project, we're probably looking at 1.2 million total. So that came out to about 400,000 for us, which we'll need that feasibility money for. I assume that's what we'll use for that. So that's just an update. I'm super excited to get this off the ground.
And before you move on.
Yep.
Related, have we ever actually closed out the memorial building committee?
No, in
I
fact,
don't think we've met in.
Still in?
I've been in touch with Christina and have a meeting on the books with her for midweek next week, so she can give me kind of the lay of the land of what's out there for feasibility to see if there's anything else we should know. She's going to want to put together a meeting because we have wish list items that still need to be addressed. We're hoping to schedule it maybe at the very end of March, beginning of April, so Michelle can join us. Because there's some financial pieces that we have to just tie out. And what we shared at the facilities subgroup is Jason's been working, Doran Whittier is still active, and WT Rich are still active because we have an odor in 4 of the classrooms. I don't need to give the report, you guys can jump in.
No, we're
And,
not giving reports tonight, but go ahead.
and they're going through all of the steps. We've done testing. There doesn't seem to be anything of concern, but what's of concern is they can't identify where it's coming from and stopping it. There doesn't seem to be mold. They're taking walls apart. They are looking at whether the concrete fully cured. I think that was one of the initial questions that you had that I know they chased down. So we're starting to see some of those new building pains, and they're trying to work through it. So we're not quite ready to close that yet.
In my house, it was an onion that had fallen down.
Yeah, questions about the committee.
Yeah.
So if the feasibility study comes back and says that the best solution is to expand Manchester Elementary to, combine the two towns' elementary school kids, then does that mean that there will be a separate committee formed then if the project is not becoming expanding Manchester and fix Essex to the smaller size, whatever it is?
Probably not, because both the Memorial Committee and the Essex, so this is taking on the issue of Essex Elementary, but it's going to be populated by people from both Manchester and Essex.
Both towns.
So if the outcome of feasibility is that we're merging and relocating,
Yeah.
I would think this group would continue forward in shepherding that project to completion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of Essex people, including myself, on the memorial.
Okay.
It's pretty even.
Mhm.
I think it's pretty even.
Just by design.
Yeah.
Because it's a district project, so there should be reps for both.
Any applicants so far?
They're coming in back.
My understanding to Anna's question that's relatedly is that the feasibility study won't actually look at what she said though, right?
Oh.
Feasibility study does not, at least according to what Andy Alderman said at the income meeting, I thought he was saying the feasibility study is designed to look at not a solution where the students would all be transferred to Memorial, but rather either repairing or replacing Essex Elementary or building in a third-party site. I just think
That's
that's
based on-
that's an important part for us all to understand.
Maybe one of the things that we could ask them to study is a merger of the two facilities.
So that's what the school building committee will discuss is what do we want?
What's the scope
What
of
is the
the
scope of the study?
But could that third party site be?
Yeah, okay, well, so we don't have to decide this today, but my understanding was that that was not.
Keeping in mind, it's, as soon as that's taken up, it's beyond the purview of the building committee, because now it becomes a regional agreement issue too, and, you know, because right now it's state that each town has it. So, doesn't mean that they can't look into it if there's no viable options in Essex or the cost is deemed way too high by the building committee. So I think Teresa's right, we need to think about how to structure that as in a reasonable way.
And that's the job.
Let me throw this out, and it's more. Certain, I think you could have the feasibility study analyze the cost benefit of the merger. And if that is what the community votes for, then we're kind of stuck with dealing with whether or not it can go. As part of the feasibility, they would have to look at things like the regional agreement and whether or not.
What the barriers would be and
I-
how to address them.
It's an interesting question whether the towns could vote on an option that may not even be possible.
They have to first, well,
Yeah, we have to work out
we
those
have to
kind of
work out
details.
but there will be a number of ideas brought to the table. Some have already publicly been brought to the table, and that will be the work of the SBC is to.
In the whole, it's not the SBC making the decision, it's the SBC overseeing the process
Yeah.
for public input to arrive at some type of, based on the public input, kind of have a community decision that's validated by the SBC. Is that a fair?
And they still come back to us
Yeah.
for, you know, the big transition from students.
Plenty of work to do.
Exciting work.
It's exciting work.
And then I just want to end with another positive, which is a shout out. It's kind of small too. Spalding Education Fund is back up and running and doing a lot of great work. And I just wanted to publicly thank them for their support. They just awarded us over $27,000 in grants for all types of things. To Hannah's point, we took something off the capital list and asked Spalding for support. So they actually funded the library refurbs, the book refurbishments for both Essex and Memorial School. So that's one of those ways where we try to find a way to take pressure off the budget and find external sources. This is just kind of a sampling of what they're types of projects they're looking to support. So everything from math kits at the elementary level to the robotics team, to some STEM cards and kids going off to modeling men. So there's a nice article in the Cricket that'll give you all the details. So these are, if you're not familiar with how the Spalding Ed Fund boards work, they do an RFP to teachers. Teachers put in for, supposed to be like an innovation support. So things that they're hoping to do to either meet their school goals, their individual goals, the school goals, the district goals. Spalding collaboratively works with us to make sure everything is aligned, and then they get to support some exciting new work. I think we try to always look for balance between two elementary schools where we're not allowing for a deep investment in one, not the other, so they don't get too far apart in terms of program and offerings, and they've been very good partners. So big thanks to the Spalding. And that's all I have.
Any other questions? School committee comment? Big thanks to both we've got 3 grant users tonight, but 2 local. So thank you to Foamy Fund. Thank you to Spalding. Is there a motion to adjourn?
And thank you to you guys. I know there was a big event tonight. And
We were
it
trying.
didn't work out.
The auditor's report is an important meeting that we can't rush.
Second.
So even rush. Any discussion? All in favor? We're adjourned at 8:29 PM. 8:29. It was 8:29.
I thought it was ugly. It's 7:30.
That.
Cases all